Skip Groff was their manager at the time. So he came over and he mixed their songs, but also he brought over some unknown bands like the Teen Idols and Minor Threat and Bad Brains.
So he brought them your way.
Yes, he did.
Wow, fascinating. That's awesome.
It was networking to the max.
Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. My name is Philip, and today we are talking about the Slickee Boys, Cybernetic Dreams of Pi. This is an awesome album and also a bit of a departure. We've been talking about a lot of hardcore and punk, and this is more new wave. So really excited to get into this album. The Slickee Boys were an awesome band that sort of ran parallel to the DC hardcore scene. Our guest today was right in the middle of all of it. Don Zientara is the founder of Inner Ear Studios, and he was one of the first people we reached out to for this season. We actually gave him the full list of all the records that we were going to be talking about for season 2, and most of which he worked on as a producer, and this is the one he chose. I think he's spoken about a lot of the bands that we talked about at length, and you can of course pick up his book, The Inner Ear of Don Zientara, at Akashic Books, or through Akashic Books, and hear many of those stories, and they're really great. So yeah, again, he's the one who chose this album, and it was really exciting. I think he hasn't spoken as much about the Slickee Boys as he has about other bands, so just getting to mine him for information about this era, these guys, this music was so valuable. So he and Alex go way back, so that was also really fun, just another great reason to have him on the pod. Don is a legend and he's still gigging, so make sure to check him out, grab his book, and without further ado, let's get into our hardcore history section.
Flex your head. It's time for some hardcore history.
By the time Cybernetic Dreams of Pi was released in 1983, the Slickee Boys consisted of Mark Noon on vocals, Kim Kane and Marshall Keith on guitars, Dan Polensky on drums, and John Chumbris on bass. This lineup had become the band's most stable and recognizable, following several years of personnel changes. The group had been performing together in this form since the early 80s, building a reputation for high-energy shows, a wide-ranging musical style, and a strong local following in DC. The band operated with a distinctly independent approach. They designed their own flyers, self-released early recordings, and booked performances at key venues across the city, including the 930 Club and DC Space. Though their sound leaned more towards garage rock and new wave than punk or hardcore, their DIY ethic and consistent presence in the city's clubs placed them firmly within the broader DC underground. Their early activity predated the rise of many of the city's better-known punk acts, and their work contributed to the development of a local infrastructure that would support a variety of alternative bands throughout the 1980s. While Cybernetic Dreams of Pi was not a hardcore record, it stood as an example of the diversity within the DC music scene at the time. The album focused on melodic hooks, science fiction themes, and stylized performances rather than speed or aggression. As the city became more closely associated with the hardcore movement, the Slickee Boys continued to represent a different side of DC music, one rooted in garage rock traditions, theatrical presentation, and creative independence.
Okay, let's talk Slickee.
Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. We have an incredible episode today. We have an amazing guest, Don Zientara. But before we get to that, let me check in with my co-host, Alex. How are you today?
My leg hurts. I'm injured. I am trying to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. I think one of the things that is a hallmark of DC arts and music scene is that you work hard, you play hard, you make art hard, and when you do all those things in a day, it's a beautiful day. But then you wake up the next morning and you don't know where you are and your leg hurts. You just don't ask questions.
You don't ask questions. But I'm sorry to hear that your leg's hurting. But otherwise, mentally, how's your head?
I am at the top of my game. I'm feeling fine. I'm fine. I try to meet each day with a positive attitude. I think that's the best any of us can do.
Our bodies may decay, but our minds will endure. Well, without further ado, we have the legend, the owner, the producer, the local hero, Don Zientara. Welcome to the DC Rock Pod. It is truly an honor to have you. I'll throw the same question to you. Don, how are you feeling today?
I feel great. Feel great.
I
Just
love
had
it.
a little bit of watermelon and, what could be better?
What could be better?
It reminds me of summertime.
I love to hear it. Well, you two have a history, a professional history. We're documenting the DC rock scene, but we're also documenting what's going on these days. How did you all get linked up originally?
Originally, it was through Pilot Waves, wasn't it, Alex?
It was through Pilot Waves. I asked him to be on my interview series, The Pilot Waves, which was about technology, community, artistry, and commerce, the intersections of those worlds. Don shared his wisdom, and he gave me some of the best life advice I ever got so far. And that's how we met.
What was that life advice? So I could read it in my mind.
The life is far too short to not do exactly what you want to do.
Ah, yes.
That
Yes.
sounds about right.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does.
You all, you were very nice to give me a platform to do some experimental musical storytelling in 2024, and you've done great work with the Stagecraft series. We're recording this quite a bit ahead of when it will come out, so who knows where that is, but it does live on the internet. So check out Stagecraft on Mixcloud. We'll plug that right up top because you both have done some awesome stuff with
Well,
local bands.
what you did basically was what the program was all about. Basically, performing and how to perform and what to do in front of an audience. Because rather than just playing your songs and singing your songs, which is very important, you still have to be a person and someone who's delivering to the audience. So I'm going to swell your head with that.
That's very kind. My head was swollen for many reasons. I'd had a baby like 3 weeks earlier, and I had slept almost zero. So that whole experience was like a blur. But it was also a life dream. I'd always wanted to mount some sort of one-man show, and it was just so cool that you all had zero hesitation about me coming on and doing that, even though I was like, hey, I've never done this before, and hey, I don't know how this is gonna go, but yeah, that was a real really cool foundational moment for me. But
we checked police reports and everything like that, and you came up clean.
good. Yeah, not only Davey, of course. Yeah, she's
I got the words I used on were clean-ish. I was like, he's clean enough.
clean enough. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, we have a signature segment here on the pod, and that's of course our DC Rock Pod icebreaker. Alex, I'll pass it over to you. What's our icebreaker for today?
The icebreaker for today is you can answer the following question as quickly as you can. Let's start with Don and then go to Philip after Don answers.
I'm ready.
What is either your favorite or first visual artist that comes to mind? Go, Don.
Bundinsky.
Philip.
Piet Mondrian.
Okay, mine, obviously I knew the question beforehand, but mine is L.S. Lowry, and you will figure out why later on in the show.
I love it. I like a quick icebreaker. We should make that a staple of the show. The rapid fire icebreaker. But Don, another thing we like to make sure we ask people, and you can take this however you want, but do you have a first DC music memory? Do you have a first memory of going to a show or playing in a band or recording or hearing something on the radio? I don't know, however you want to answer that. But do you have a foundational sort of core memory, as they say, from the DC music scene?
Sure. When I first of all, remember when I came to DC, it was late-ish in life. I was 24, something like that, 23. I can't remember exactly. So I had a lot of musical experiences up to that point. But the first musical memory basically was I wanted to connect up with some musicians to form a band. that was my first memory of this whole thing. I wanted to play music. And so I went searching through the classifieds in the city paper. And, I found a couple people and we did, basically.
I was curious. I was going to ask, I don't know if we think of the newspaper as technology. I don't know if we think of bulletin boards as technology, but they are.
Gutenberg would think of that as technology.
Exactly, right? And I think what Alex and I have found time and again on this show is so much of how bands formed, how bands promoted themselves came down to the technology that was available. And so, yeah, I was curious if it was maybe like by putting up flyers or in your case, through the classifieds. But did it stick right away? Did the first group of people that came together stick, or were you in like a cycle of bands when you got to DC?
No, the first one stuck, except for, personnel changes along the way.
Yeah.
But that happens with every band. But it kind of did, luckily enough. It really worked out pretty well. There's still unto this, and then we're talking mid 1970s, and I still play occasionally with the drummer of the band, who's on the Outer Banks. Ignored that. And the guitar player died, unfortunately, and the singer is married to the drummer, and I still know her too. So it's they were kind of friendships for life.
Well, I'm sorry about the player who died, but I love to hear about the friendships for life, because that's what it's all about. I mean, that's as good as it gets. And I know that you first founded Inner Ear in the 70s, and it was at your home at that time. Is that right?
Yes,
And when
it originally was.
tell me if you would, and we'll get to the Slickee Boys soon, because that's what we're here to talk about. But I would be remiss if we didn't get a little Inner Ear talk on the pod, because it's such a towering institution. Can we call it an institution? It's it means more to the DC scene than any other place, any other establishment. The work that you've helped put into the world is it's incredible, and the volume of it is staggering. So yeah, it was in your home in the 70s. And tell me again when it moved to that Arlington location.
It moved right in 1990. We were building it about November and December. I say we, the builders, and we moved in right after the first of the year, sometime in that area, maybe a month after that. So it was here, right in this room where I am right now. This was the control room, and until that point. And then we stayed there for 32 years.
It's a pretty amazing space. I had the good fortune of getting to record there once, and that really meant a lot to me. So that was really fun to see.
Good.
Alex, what about you? Were you bopping around the studio ever?
Well, I want to just quickly mention, as Don's non-hired publicist, that if you'd like to know more about Inner Ear, check out his book, The Inner Ear of Don Zientara, available on Akashic Books. Check out Akashic Books. Use your web search tool of choice. Look up Inner Ear of Don Zientara, Akashic Books, and go get your copy today.
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome. Yeah, I get to record once at Don's studio, and it was really badass. We used the big tape machine. I still use those tracks. I've been doing a vocal track with that. And it was just a great experience. And that, and that's a friendship that's lasted for a long time. That's the best part of Stagecraft, is the friendship with Don and all the, artistic relationships I've made as a result of that. Like, that's literally what community is for, and what's happened. And I'm just appreciative of that time.
Yeah, it was a wonderful time. It was, I think we touched a lot of musicians and people who performed, and we met a lot of them, and just they just gave so much good advice over the years. How many? 5 years, Alex? 6 years?
No, it's actually just shy of 9 years.
9 years?
Yeah. So almost a decade of and we've given people a platform to say the things that they want to said, and I think we've asked them some fairly bizarre and awkward questions, which I think is part of the process.
Part of your job.
Well, Don, you mentioned bands evolve and that's what they do. We're here today to talk about the Slickee Boys, and they formed in Bethesda, Maryland in the mid 70s. Did you know the band when Martha Hull was the singer? Were you aware of them at that time?
Yes.
Yeah. What's your earliest memory of the Slickee Boys, if you have one, or some early memories?
Here. The I'm going to give you, this is kind of a longish tale to the whole thing.
Perfect.
When I was in the band that I aforementioned, the one I got in, the guitar player was Robert Goldstein, who was probably more progressive than the rest of the band. The rest of the band was kind of a folk rocky type of band. Perfectly fine, did great songs, but it was nothing new, nothing inventive, nothing, no new music coming out of there. And when we broke up in 1976, because I was getting married and didn't have needed time to do things, he went into another band with Howard Wolfing, which, interestingly enough, we have a single coming out on DSI Records in a couple of months. Two. I'm doing one. I have one song on one side, and Howard has a song on the other side. But anyway, he got together with Howard Wolfing and a couple other people, and they needed a demo. I recorded a demo for them because I recorded a demo for our band, and I had the equipment laying around. And they also wanted a recording when they were playing live at the American University Tavern. And at the time, the Slickee Boys were playing with them. And Martha Hull was singing at the time. And Martin Kane, or Kim Kane, actually, he changed his name, asked me if I could record them if I had extra tape. I did. I recorded them, and that was kind of a long, involved relationship because Skip Groff was their manager at the time. So he came over and he mixed their songs. I'm not sure if he mixed Cybernetic Dreams. I don't think so. I think he was not connected with the band at the time, but earlier stuff he did. But also he brought over some unknown bands like the Teen Idols and Minor Threat and Bad Brains.
So he brought them your way.
Yes, he did.
Wow, fascinating. That's awesome.
It was networking to the max.
Now I'm told, Alex told me once that you have a very special memory for the bands that you've recorded, and most of the time you remember most distinctively what they ate or what food was around the studios. Can you confirm or deny the special memory power?
Well, first of all, they were teenagers, late teenagers. They ate anything they can get their hands on at the time. And I remember, and this is Ian Mackay telling me that coming into Arlington for the first time to record in the studio here in Arlington, where I have my studio, they came over the bridge, crossed the Potomac River, and they were getting kind of anxious because they're wondering if there will be a 7-Eleven in the wilds of Arlington. So it was typical teenage thought. So
out in the sticks, will they have all the
out in the sticks, where the deep animals,
yeah,
the bears and lions and tigers.
That's great. Well, as an Alexandria resident, I can confirm that we do have 7-Elevens out here across the Potomac. Now, you mentioned the American University Tavern. I get the sense from this era that a lot of what differentiated it from the DC of the late 60s or the early 70s was new venues popping up, and sort of like the Urban Verbs and Slickee Boys being at the beginning of this wave with the Atlantis and eventually the 930 Club and some other places. Do you have memory of this, the Slickee Boys and this music, punk music, and how it kind of cohabitated or coexisted, grew up with these new venues? Does that line of thinking track to you?
Yeah. First of all, a little bit of background. Everything has a little bit of background. The bands that were coming up were trying to distinguish themselves as being anti-California sound or anti-disco, because disco is sort of petering out at this point, and the California sound of very, very muted, and muted drums and things like that, where everything was in a padded room, and this artificial reverb was in the highlights. Eagles. We're talking Eagles and things like that.
Okay, so you're not talking SST. This is like
No.
polish. This is pre. Okay, I see.
Right, pre that. So the bands that came after that, whether they're called alternative or new music, because punk wasn't a thing quite at the time.
Yeah.
And Slickee Boys considered themselves new music or alternative. They had to find innovative places to play at, because the clubs just thought this was too weird and for their clients. And when the punks came on the scene, because they sort of, I guess they had a reputation for being a little more rowdy, let's say. The clubs didn't like that at all. So places like VFW halls, any place really, church basements, any place they could play at, they would play. And they recruited these places quite nicely. There were a lot of good organizers in the movement for new music and punk, and the band that Robert Goldstein played in, that I recorded, the Look, was one of those bands. They weren't punk; they were more towards the, for lack of a better association, Roxy Music type, but it was still new music in a sense. And he knew, of course, a lot of the punk people, and for a long time he was the music librarian for NPR, I believe. So he knew music inside and out, and he was a very good guitarist too. And he played at a lot of art galleries. He was very artistic fellow in general. And I think the whole movement, punk, new music, alternative, was looking for an artistic venue that was something other than the stifling disco or California sound, which was very kind of cookie cutter type. I'm sure I will be blasted for saying that, but because there were a lot of exceptions for sure, but they were all kind of the same.
Yeah, and oh gosh, I have so many things wow, so many threads I want to pull on from that. That's wonderful. We'll keep it to the Slickee Boys. When you listen to those early recordings with Martha Hull, you can hear a real like Talking Head 77, almost a Patti Smith influence on it. And then and that's really cool, and there DC had some really great polished rock bands in the late 60s and early 70s, but the Slickee Boys are almost the first real glimpse of this edge that's going to come in, like the hardcore stuff. They're not quite there, but it's interesting because the early Slickee Boys is rather rough around the edges and kind of aggressive. And then to me, what we're going to get into today, which I think is their the crowning achievement recording wise, Cybernetic Dreams of Pi, that has more of like a polish to it. The edge of the attitude is still there, but it's almost like once Duran Duran and Devo and stuff came in the early 80s, perhaps that redirected the course of the band because again, what I think is interesting is you get these early, punk, new music glimpses, and then, but the Slickee Boys are not the ones to carry that thread all the way through. They're not the Minor Threat, they're not the SOA or what. Like so it's almost interesting that they kind of started a branch of something that they veered off of in my mind. All the while, I know all of their contemporaries, loved the Slickee Boys. So, does that resonate with what I'm saying at all? Does that make you think of anything in terms?
Is there
of,
a question in that?
I don't know if there's a question in that. That was podcasting at its finest, which is when someone thinks of an idea and then decides to talk it all the way through.
What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts? I don't know. So we'll find them in the edit.
Welcome to my nightmare. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, I mean, I think fundamentally, if you listen to the music, there's a couple of songs that like straight up, it's like the same chord progressions of some of like the punk songs for sure. With maybe like a seventh or a extra, something flattened in there. But it's going up and down the same way for sure, and definitely at the same speed, in some cases. And then there's sort of like this, almost like doo-wop on this particular album that, that has, especially in 1983, you had some of the punk flavor of that, with like the Ramones and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and I'm sure to more obscure bands, to people who want to get more historical.
I love it. Well, Alex, save me when let's read a little bit from Mark Anderson's Dance of Days. Will you take that for us?
Is that at the I? Is that starting with besides?
Yeah,
Okay.
how the Slickee Boys got their name.
Oh, hold on. No, I'm sorry. I'm in a different place. Hold on.
Oh no,
Wait,
you're
wait.
right. You're right. Besides mixing rock with punk, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Besides mixing rock with punk, Kane wanted to utilize the jarring cross-cultural images from his experiences as a youth in Korea. For the band to be, he chose the name Slick Boys, GI slang for the rock-inspired Korean street toughs who sold knives, cigarettes, and other black market goods to American soldiers. With the concept and sound in mind, Kane picked up the guitar seriously for the first time and began looking for allies. Mark Anderson from the Dance of Days.
It's very well written. Yeah. He had that type of feeling about the music. Kane did. But along with that was a interesting mix of the oh gosh, I'm blanking on it. The guitarist. What was his name?
So by the time we get to Cybernetic Dreams of Pi, we've got Mark Noon on the vocals, Marshall Keith on guitar,
Marshall Keith.
Marshall Keith.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting. He was more towards the surf type sound, which, I hate to dig too deep into it, but that gets the sevenths and the doo-wop kind of sound sort of bubbling in there in the whole mix. And Mark Noon had more of what I'm sort of kindred spirits to the punk or punk pop mentality, where you have a melody to the music. And you could hear that in more when Mark is singing his songs rather than when Martha was singing hers. So that's, they had an interesting blend of people in there.
Yeah. Well, and let's move over, let's keep talking about Cybernetic Dreams of Pi. Do you remember what do you remember from recording that album, from the process itself? It's a decently long album, 12 tracks, and they're not short songs. So was that a long process, or kind of came in a few days, knocked it out? That's what it was.
Oh no, it was longer than that, but not extremely long. a lot of the bands basically wanted to, and this is for all the new music bands, they wanted to do it fairly quickly and get the energy that they had captured. So this was fairly, it was thought out, but not overly thought and not overly played. They did things, and then that was pretty much it for the way they wanted it recorded. There wasn't a lot of overdubs or things like that. I think, I was just listening to some of the songs yesterday on it, and I was surprised at how fast they went.
Mhm.
In my head, I envisioned them slower, at a slower tempo. Um, but that, and they kept things up, and that was their punk side of things. I think Tim McCain really wanted things to move into where the new music was going, and nobody at that time knew where it was going. All they knew is it had to change because the music and that was coming out and commercially was not just not good for them. They wanted something totally different, something a little more artistic, basically. But it was a thought out process, and they worked out parts, and in a few instances, harmonies and things like that. And Mark was I think he was a music major at one of the major schools, and he knew probably more about music and music theory than most of them did. But they all chipped in their what they had to offer, and it turned out to be a good mix.
They do have a good mix, and like you were mentioning with the surf rock influence, When I Go to the Beach, probably the most classic example of that. Was there a tension in the studio of we don't want to be too much of a surf rock band, we don't want to be Dick Dale versus, or did they seem to have the arrangements worked out, or was there some sort of a push and a pull in terms of the identity of what they were going for?
I didn't see any push or pull. Now, they may have done that on their own and just had discussions about it, but I thought that they just sort of all brought their own aesthetic into it, and there was no conflict in any way. They contributed what they could. You could hear it on some of the things that were later on. I think on the CD, the release CD after the album, they put "Gotta Tell Me Why," and it's it's very poppy. It's very poppy and very melodic. Um, and they went down that road mainly, where where everybody was included. You throw in what you have to offer, I'll throw in what I have to offer, and that was how it went.
And Don, what was your two-part question? What was your role as a producer in this record? And what do you see your role as a producer in what is and was your production style? Like, were you helping the band say this arrangement's not working, or more of the I'm here to set up the microphones in the right place and press record, or a little mix of both? What
Ooh, that's a great hat. First of all, they produced the record.
Okay.
This record, the Slickee Boys actually produced it. My role at that time, since I was this is getting into it fairly early, I was pushing the buttons. That was my role in the whole thing. It was kind of on the brink of, we don't know what the heck a producer is, so why do we need one? That type of thing. And that's what a lot of the punk bands are. I mean, if I deal with a lot of bands today, which just say, producer, what good would a producer do? And you have to question that, what good would a producer do? And if you know, but if you don't know, you just question it, and you may just dismiss it.
And do you have a preference when bands come in looking for a lot of input versus not, or you're happy either way?
If they don't need a lot of input, I mean, first of all, if they've got the song settled and they sound great, the arrangements are good, the lyrics seem to flow, everything just seems to click in the whole song, great. But if I could throw in some things, I'll be well. As an engineer, I have been a producer in a lot of things by default. That's simply the way it is, because they can't afford usually a producer, and once again, going back to it, don't really think they need one. It's one more person in the way of getting their record out.
Yeah, that's a great note. And I'm probably guilty of using producer and engineer interchangeably just now. So that's a great distinction to make. Very cool. I love it. Well, what do y'all say we get into a little listening section? Listen to about 90 seconds of the songs and kind of chat about them?
Sure.
Love it. Awesome. I've got a few queued up. We'll start with Escalator 66, and then if anybody wants to take us somewhere from there, sounds good.
There's no hot licks. We're having fun and games every night. We can tune it till we feel just right. You may not last, but then again you might. Take it easy cause you need no fix. On Escalator 66. On Escalator 66. Take it easy cause you need no fix.
Escalator 66, and what struck me as interesting is I can think of a few bands right now that sound a lot like that still make music like that in DC, and I think if you put it out, it would be very well received. Flasher is one that comes to mind. I know they're maybe technically Baltimore based, but we'll count them in the DMV stew. And
oh my God, I feel like that's the most controversial thing you've ever said on this show.
what, that Baltimore is DC?
The Baltimore is part of the DC scene. Oh my God.
Well,
What's next, Philip? Richmond? Oh my God.
We don't have the time to litigate the boundaries. And no, I know some of the members of Flasher were in Priest, so we got a lot of DC DNA there. But it's interesting to hear the new music to me, and this kind of gets to a broader point about the Slickee Boys. It's sort of been absorbed into indie music. It's just indie rock now, right? It's evolved and gone through different stages, but I think what they were getting at was ahead of its time, but also in a way that like it's sort of an evergreen genre. And I don't know that I had, before we came to this album to think about the Slickee Boys, I thought of them more in the punk tradition, but listening back to Cybernetic Dreams of Pi, it feels pretty timeless, and yet they were sort of at the very beginning of music that was going to sound like this. You know, you can call it kind of post-punk, you can call it new wave. It's all rock and roll to me, to quote, the
Well, they couldn't be
original.
post-punk because they were too early for post-punk.
Yeah,
But
but if they put it out now, they'd be called post-punk. Does that make
Yes.
sense? Isn't that?
Yes.
That's sort of what I is.
Yeah. It's really easy looking at it from the perspective of where we are now,
Mhm.
looking back 40, 50 years. But back then, it was all sort of just a big stew of different things going on. Like you said, mentioned Talking Heads, but then you'd had, Roxy Music, and then you had the bands like, like the Eagles. Like, I'm not disparaging the Eagles. They had some good songs out, but people didn't like their side. They didn't like certain things about it. And there were bands that, kind of like the Talking Head songs, but didn't like certain things about the band. And the same things with punk music too. Originally, punk was very just bombastic,
Mhm.
but it turned into something that was a little more controlled and a little more melodic as time went on, and very melodic. Had melody for sure. I wouldn't say, I don't know about very melodic, but it changed quite a bit and evolved quite a bit. And that's what the Slickee Boys did too, through all their time, through the Martha Hall days and through the Mark Noon days too.
Do you think it had more to do with the friends they had, the attitude, the way they dressed, all the above, or because I don't mean to discredit them as like not punk, but I this to me is very well. I don't know. Maybe it's because I just grew up beyond it. It's hard for me to parse out this from just rock music. But what? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, contextually though, and Don, you can give us some insight on this. Like, it sounds like this was in response to some banality that was in and around the area at the time, either directly or, through media distribution, right? It sounds like there was a little bit of like a milquetoast sort of feel, and this was a reaction to sort of like jettison that sort of like boring art, right?
Yes, absolutely. And remember also Tim Kane's vision of just being bizarre, a little bit goth thrown in there, a little bit of everything into the mix. This was a reaction to the same thing the punks were reacting to, the fact that their music, they thought their music would not be remembered past, a week from now. It was the kind of thing that everybody thought would be totally forgettable. So the songs were short, to the point, and then they ended. And the next song started short, to the point, and then they ended. And they just, everything was this kind of nihilistic type of attitude towards music, because the art that they saw out there that was being heralded as art was not good to them. So let's throw something against the wall and, see if anybody notices. No one probably will, but we'll see if they do. And they did that. So they could do this with abandon. It was the freedom of basically just not of being ignored by the rest of the artistic world.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I love people that you meet that they strike me this way as, why would you listen to the music that's being shoved down your throat? Why wouldn't you just listen to music that your friends make? You make music, your friends make music. That's all you need, and they are also interestingly a little bit less, this came out, I believe, on Twin Tone Records.
Yes.
So this wasn't on Discord, and I don't know if they predated the Replacements or if they were completely concurrent with the Replacements and Husker Du and things like that. But this was, it's a little bit less involved with, the scene compared to some of the records that would have come out on Discord around the same time. And there is bizarro kind of it does take the avant-garde approach more, and a little bit more of the art world approach, as opposed to hardcore, which is more very well, it's a whole bunch of things, but this strikes me as it doesn't surprise me that this is the record from this era in DC that came out on Twin Tone Records and not Discord, because it does stand out and it has a little bit of something different to say. Let's take a listen to Pictures of Matchstick Men, which you, Don, you had mentioned as one of your favorites.
Yeah, I think that song, I enjoy listening to covers that bands do, because I like to see their interpretation and hear their interpretation of it. It tells me something about the band and how they're looking and listening to music, what their strong points are in their songs and things like that. So go ahead and play it.
When I look up to the sky, I see your eyes, a funny kind of yellow. When hooked in bed, I shake my head, I see your face underneath my pillow. I wake this morning, tossed and yawning, see your face come creeping through my window. Pictures of matchstick men and you, mirages of matchstick men and you. All I ever see is him and you. Windows whispers your reflection when I look in their direction gone. When the recording stops, your face it just won't leave me alone. Pictures of matchstick men and you, mirages of matchstick men and you. All I ever see is him and you. You in the sky, you whizzing by, you make me cry, you eyes. You in the sky, you whizzing by, you make me cry, you eyes.
That was, of course, Pictures of Matchstick Men.
So this, of course, ties into L.S. Lowry, which is what the term Matchstick Men came from, the painter. Look it up, kids. Go to your local libraries.
And oh, there we go. Okay, so nice little callback from our icebreaker. This was, yeah, the Status Quo was the English band that originated that song. Yeah, was there anything specific about that version that you remember, Don, or wanted to
I think
talk
it's
about?
just a good song.
Yeah.
Generally, it's a good song, well arranged, and it's a catchy song it's a catchy guitar line that follows the vocal line. It just resonates
Yeah.
with me. I like it. I like it in the sense. But once again, I listened to it and my gosh, this is faster than I thought. Do I have had the wrong speed? Is my computer on the wrong speed?
Turntable's been going too fast.
Yes, exactly. It was astonishing. But that was the way the whole album was generally. Even when I go to the beach, and all the rest of the songs are just they seem punkish.
Yeah.
Very punkish listening back to them. And I hadn't listened to them for many years.
Well, they really hold up to me. I mean, this is one of those records, which again I've said, but I feel like you could release it right now and you'd have a packed house at Black Cat. You know, this is a great record, and it's sort of I don't want to say it's outside of time, because it does have some hallmarks of this time. But yeah, they're a great band, and maybe that's what it comes down to, like kind of over and over again, is like no matter if it was sort of drenched in the era that it came from, if you've got good players together, it's going to hold up.
Yep. And listening back to it, I, of course, as an engineer, hear all the uh, recording foibles and what I would consider errors and things like that. But it really doesn't matter. It comes down once again to the old adage that it's the song.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, we're lucky to have had the Slickee Boys. Um, and as we move into our close here, do you all have any final thoughts on the Slickee Boys themselves? And Don, just for you, I'll mention I do a scripted history section at the beginning. So if this felt light on history, don't worry, this was just a conversation.
This is our chance to contradict some of the history, right?
Exactly. Yes, this is the time to upset it. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on any final parting thoughts on the Slickee Boys and their contribution to the scene, or really, I mean, anything else that you want to say? We'd love to hear. You know.
Well, I thought that they were, innovators. I mean, that's very trite and cliche, but they really were at the time. And I think a lot of bands could really take note of the fact that it's very important when you come on the scene and when you present your music, because they came on at exactly the right time to shift things a little bit musically in the city. And that mattered a whole lot. I think if they came on the scene now, sure, they'd have good songs and they'd be probably well done. They may be recorded a whole lot better because things have changed a whole lot. That may have changed it. I know a lot of recordings were in the more raw state. It has more emotion and more feeling than some of the slicker productions. It just comes out a little bit more. So basically, what they simply took a chance on trying some of this new music rather than following in the footsteps of a lot of bands like, the bands that were around at the time, which
Mhm.
were, they copied the California sound or the disco sort of sound, the heavy beat but very muted drums, very padded drums, things like that, um, lofty harmonies, just sweet, sweet music, and it's good in a sense that it lulls you along, but it really doesn't give you the jolt that some of the Slickee Boys music or some of the punk music did in years to come.
Yeah, and they 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 sort of stand in a lane of their own, and that's really special. You know, they didn't bend to maybe what was starting to take off in DC and change it up and become a hardcore band or anything. And um, you know, I'm not going to call anyone out, but there are examples of you know sort of imitation bands of one band starts a movement and then others start to sound like them. And Slickee Boys just didn't do that. They were uniquely themselves from start to finish, from what I can tell. Alex, what about you? You got any final thoughts on the Slickies?
Well worth your time to listen to this album from the start to finish.
Yeah.
It really is like such a cavalcade of sounds and textures and musical styles. I don't profess to know all the lineage of what they listened to or where things went from here, but as you look at the roster of, call it the top 100 hits of 1983, 1984, it's interesting to see what was in quote unquote popular music at the time in comparison to that. I'm not going to give anyone any spoilers, but it's worth taking a listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this. Remember, this is was one of the earlier Mark Noon bands. So he was just in the band a very short amount of time, and he didn't have a chance to write a lot. Marshall Keith was writing, and I think they both wrote, and Kim Kane wrote some songs too. It was, but it was really Mark Noon's songs that uh, took them, I think, to a newer place or a little bit higher level, because the others were less accessible, which was part of their trademark. They wanted to be less accessible. They were less accessible. They made themselves less accessible, but not so much as to completely alienate the audience, for sure. They wanted to be a little bit scary. They wanted to be a little bit far out there. And Marshall Keith, by the way, still plays quite a bit now, and he has some wonderful songs. He is, as a musician, he's just, one heck of a person, and has got beautiful songs at this point. I would love to have seen him in the Slickee Boys right now.
Yeah. There's a great interview that you just made me think of, and it's with a different band from this time, No Trend. And they get off stage, and local DJ says, "Oh, it seems like the band was really into it. That's too." I'm sorry. Seems like the audience was really into it. That's too bad. Don't you want to scare the audience? The band says, "No, we want to connect with people." But there was the attitude certainly, yeah, was in the air of
Yeah.
the shock and awe.
Yeah.
But
And by the way, Martha Hull was just in the studio a couple years ago. And I know I don't think she was represented at all on Cybernetic Dreams of Pi, but her voice is still wonderful.
Yeah.
She sings like you wouldn't believe.
I had the opportunity to hear her with Scream on, they did a Hangman cover. That was on the latest record. That's just terrific.
And they had the Scream had Michael Reddy in the studio, who could also do some wonderful. I think he did some backups on something. Wonderful voice. Some of these are still viable musicians, very viable.
Yeah.
It's not better than they were in their youth.
I think some of Scream's latest songs are the best they've ever put out. I completely agree. DC Special is a terrific album. There are a lot of folks who are hitting at the top of their game. The Misthetics, there's a lot of really vibrant stuff from people who have been around since the 80s, which is pretty awesome. But this is coming out spring 2025. Don, do you have anything that you want to plug before we wrap up, or as we wrap up? Anything you want the folks to know about at home?
Not really. I mean, I go on with life. I put out music, a lot of local bands at this point.
Don has a record that came out. It was like last year, Don. It's available at Discord. Please go and purchase it online. And then, of course, the aforementioned Inner Ear, the Inner Ear of Don Zientara, which, of course, is available at akashicbooks.com. Go purchase both of them now.
Yes. Thanks for jogging my memory. Yes, that's true. And also, there is a Christmas album out, which hopefully I could send you, Phil, the information about, and you could put that online.
Sure.
Put one song on, and like I said, there's another one coming out with DSI that I mentioned before with Howard Wolfing. That and I'm playing around with the Don Z scheme. We're doing stuff, a lot of not the most new, not record or not groundbreaking music, but just good music. I mean, at this point, I just want to put out music that I enjoy, and that's all. And it's usually not going to be new. It's probably only that to the kids. Leave the kids do it.
Well, it's been an absolute honor and a treat to have you on. Your impact on the DC scene is just beyond what we can capture, even on this podcast where we go quite slowly and methodically through everything. So thank you for all your work. Thank you for being such a brilliant source of inspiration and light for the community. Alex, do you have any parting plugs?
Yes, go and check out the Half Shy Song Workbook. I don't get any money for this endorsement. And in fact, I probably should ask the person before I tell everyone about it. But I don't care. It's called the Hash Song Workbook. Use your web search tool and look it up. It's a cool song workbook for people who have sometimes a hard time focusing on the difficulty that journaling brings to the table at times.
Love it. Well, this has been a treat. Go check out Cybernetic Dreams of Pi and all the music out there from the Slickee Boys. You know, to date, we still don't have a farewell slogan. So until we think of one.
No theme music.
No theme music. Cue the theme music. There you go. Ta-da.
I can't wait for the summer. I've been waiting too long. I'm gonna go to the seashore, 'cause that's where I belong.